Hi everyone, I would like to welcome you to this SAMAG webinar, and I just would like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians on the land on which I live and work. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. SAMAG also acknowledges all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here tonight, and we pay our respects to your elders past, present and emerging. The Sydney Arts Management Advisory Group, SAMAG, offers an annual program of events to share practical, inspiring and innovative ideas to grow an inclusive and resilient arts sector. Our monthly events are designed as professional development for artists and arts workers and encourage knowledge sharing across the sector. So tonight we're going to be exploring our creative habits and resources to embrace, to maintain hope and resilience during uncertainty and uncertain times. The chat will be open, so if you have questions, please do post them there for our panel to answer throughout the night, and we will also have a question and answer time at the end. We also have two lovely Auslan speakers here tonight who will be interpreting it for us as well. If at any point during the night you feel the need to seek support, whether it is during the discussion of tonight's events or after the event, we will be giving out phone numbers and contacts of services that you can contact if you need help. But now let me introduce our panel facilitator for the night, the lovely Jackie Bailey. Jackie is the founder and principal of BYP Group and has 20 years of experience in the Australian government and non-profit sectors. Jackie is passionate about diversity, equity and creative democracy and is a leading expert in both creative industries, trends and social impact in the arts. Jackie has a PhD, University Medal, a BA in first class honours, Masters of Theology and a postgraduate diploma in digital media. Jackie's company BYP Group is the social impact evaluation partner for Creative Victoria and is on the select research panels for the federal and New South Wales governments and the Ian Potter Foundation. Jackie is also a writer of creative fiction and non-fiction. She has been published in a number of publications, including the Sydney Morning Herald, Arts Hub, Artlook, Arts Professional UK, Global Storytelling and Online Opinion. Her novel was shortlisted for the 2018 Kill Your Darlings Unpublished Manuscript Award. She's an alumnus of the Varuna Writers Centre and a recipient of the UNSW Research Excellence Award. I'll now hand it over to Jackie to introduce our panel guests and lead tonight's discussion. Over to you.
Thanks, Zoe. That's I haven't heard all of that read out in such a long time, and the thing that really stuck with me was the 20 years. Like, yeah, I'm old. That's okay. So it's such a pleasure to be with you all tonight and with these wonderful women. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and I'm ready to learn some very interesting things from them all and gain from their wisdom. I'm calling in from the traditional lands of the Wadi Wadi people of the Dharawal Nation, and I want to pay my respects to First Nations elders past, present and emerging, and any First Nations colleagues joining us tonight. I want to thank you for the privilege of being able to live and work on country. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers tonight. First up, I'm going to introduce Eugenie Lee. Give us a wave, Eugenie. Eugenie is a very decorated artist, an interdisciplinary artist. She has a conceptual focus on the lived experience of living with persistent pain. She works quite a lot with pain scientists and researchers who investigate ways that technology can assist in pain research. And she draws on that to develop participatory performances using all sorts of things: technology, installation, sculpture, paintings, VR, electronics, you name it. It seems that Eugenie has worked with it or will be very soon. She is also the recipient of major grants and residency awards, and she's a member of the Global Alliance of Pain Patient Advocate Task Force. which is all very super impressive. So thank you, Eugenie, for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Now I'll introduce the lovely Catherine Boydell. Now, Catherine, like Eugenie, has a CV as long as my arm, so I'm going to keep it relatively brief. Catherine is a professor of mental health at the Black Dog Institute, and she does all sorts of research into, and I probably am misunderstanding this, because you know what it's like when you try and understand someone's PhD topic. I feel like that when I look at Catherine's CV. It's just full of very complex and interesting things, which I wish I knew more about. So I'm hoping to learn more tonight. She does work in the area of how to use artistic means for translating research findings, as well as looking at arts and creative means for addressing mental health issues with, as I understand it, difficult to reach populations. And she's been working with the Art Gallery of New South Wales on a Creativity on Prescription culture dose program, which has shown, I think, statistically significant results already that the arts can help with mental health. And now I will turn to Lynn Worsley, who joins us tonight in her capacity as an expert really in resilience. She's the director of the Resilience Centre and director of the Resilience Donut. And I know you all want to know what that is, so she will be showing us that a bit later. She's also the author of the Resilience Donut book, The Secret of Strong Adults, which I've already had a look at and have dog-eared a number of sections before talking about with my 9-year-old. She's a teacher and psychologist, and she really combines research and theory with practice. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from all three of these amazingly talented women. Thank you so much for joining us. Now I'm going to kick off with you, Eugenie, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'd really like to hear a little bit about you and your practice. I think it's a really nice way to start our conversation by starting with you, the artist, to hear a little bit about that.
Before I do that, I would like to acknowledge the people of Wangal clan where I am, who are the traditional custodian of this land, where others also call Canada Bay. And I would also like to pay respect to elders, both past and present, of the Eora Nation, and extended respect to other Aboriginals present. So I am a Korean-born Australian interdisciplinary artist, but I actually come from a visual arts background, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So in the last few years, I've been solely focusing on creating hands-on participatory performances that involve being in contact with participants in very close proximity. So basically, I attach sticky electronics directly onto their skins. And the last artwork that I've done is on pelvic pain artworks. So I actually had to literally pull down a little bit of their underwears and stick their 2 sticky pads at the front and at the back where the sacrum, where the little triangle bits are. So I have to interact with participants very, very closely. And these interactive performances are created by appropriating the latest scientific concepts and the lab materials, including like virtual realities and haptic electronics, and reconfiguring them for non-therapeutic uses. Like I actually literally give people pain or pain-like experiences. And so I create holistic pain-like experiences, including socio, psycho, biological models as creative outcomes.
So have you got any pictures you can show us?
Yeah.
That'd be great, just to get a sense of it.
So just bear with me. This, I'm about to show you a documentation of the work that I've done last year at the Big Anxiety Festival.
Yeah.
Let me just quickly go to this. Okay.
So Eugenie, what is she doing?
Basically, she's looking at VR. She's playing a very simple game. She's hitting a ball against a wall. So the idea is that people living with pelvic pain, one of the things that they wish that people understand the most is that how difficult it can be to do simple things. So
Right.
it affects them cognitively as well as sensory, psychological, socially. It can be extremely challenging for them. So I'm basically putting people into this situation where they get to play a really simple game where it doesn't require any explanations, and they get to play whilst they're experiencing pelvic pain symptoms.
Right. Okay. Wow. That sounds amazing. Thanks, Eugenie. We might stop the video there just because we can't actually hear the audio
Oh, I'm
from it.
sorry.
No, that's okay. But it was really good to see, someone actually wearing the belt and doing the things. I appreciate that. Eugenie, I might, that's a really great segue for me because I want to ask all three of you about what resilience means for you. And as you were speaking and showing us the woman interacting with the VR and the haptic belt, you brought up all the dimensions that of one's life that are affected by chronic pain. So you brought up, pain isn't just pain, but there's this cognitive, social, emotional, all these different dimensions of the impact of pain. So I'd really love to hear from all three of you about what resilience means for you, given that multidimensionality of the experiences like pain or stress or trauma. Lynn, you want to go first?
Yeah, can I jump in? I'd just like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the land where I'm sitting, and for the Aboriginal people past and present, and for those to be our future. With that resilience, I'd like to actually acknowledge that it is not a noun. It's not an endpoint. It's not a word to describe a character trait or a personality trait. It's a process. So resilience is very much like a verb, a doing word. So it's a process of interacting and connecting with people. And so I can actually show you a quick screen. I'll share you my screen with the definition on it, if you will bear with me for a second. So it is a process it actually divides into three parts, but I call it the process of individual development of competence or personal competence at the same time as navigating and negotiating with resources at the same time as going through a tough time. So there are three things that actually build and interact in order to build the resilience process. So it's the developing of skills like social skills or personal competence skills, working with the resources, like your social resources in particular, and going through tough times. And when we start talking about that, we particularly start bringing up the very fact that none of those, like you take out one of those aspects, then you sort of take away the multidimensional part of resilience. And when I've been working with resilience process, looking at that in my research, what I have been looking at is what you call an ecological model. So the ecological model means we look at what are the resources around that will be affected or will be used in order to build that process of resilience. So someone going through pain and someone who's got intense pain that's affecting all dimensions of their life, it will affect also all of the resources and the connections that they have that will essentially mean that they can draw on in order to build their resilience. So for example, they may not have the fullest relationship with their partner because they're in pain, and so that gets affected. They may go to bed early. They might not be able to be up having socializing with other people because they can't connect as much because they're so exhausted from the pain. They may also have a change in their expression, which will change how they make friends as well and how they reach out for help. And it may be that people get worn down in that process. So those people around who are going to actually help them develop their resilience, the resilience process, may be knocked off. They may not have quite as many. And we talk about building up to at least 3 areas of strength or areas of connection, and bringing those together and helping people to learn how to lean in when someone's in pain, or someone's in a depressive state or a mental illness, or they're going through a transition in their life. Leaning in is something that we don't often learn to do.
So, there's so much in that, Lynn. Thank you for that. I've got a bunch of questions I want to ask you, but what I might do is come back to you and maybe ask Catherine if she can build on that a little bit from her perspective as well, from your work at the Black Dog Institute and, you know, and all the other aspects of your research. What do you observe in terms of what resilience is, and is particularly drawing on what Lynn's talking about in terms of the resources that we need to embody resilience, I suppose, or to practice resilience?
Yeah, absolutely, Jackie. And thanks, Lynn, for that beautiful description of resilience, because I think it explains, or it's a beautiful counter to those, I think, who resist the term because they view it or they define it very narrowly. So we'll say, well, resistance is a blame the individual, and it's very individualistic. So expectations that an individual bounce back from an adverse or stressful event. And I think the way you've described it so beautifully in a holistic way resonates very much with my views in terms of thinking about the social determinants of health and well-being, and it's much broader than an individual trait. So I really appreciate that broader definition, and I'm really looking forward to exploring more your resilient donut, because I think it's likely to sort of exemplify this broader view. And I think that's one of the things that our work at the Black Dog is focused on, is moving beyond the formal health and mental health system to look at other social determinants of health and mental health and well-being. So that for us, if you think about an individual who's coming to a depression clinic because they're depressed, but they're depressed because they're marginally housed or they're in debt over their heads, well, then you sort of have to think beyond what formal treatment or psychological therapies might be. So again, it's taking a much more holistic view. And of course, arts and culture feature very much in that broader view. And as Jackie mentioned earlier, my program of research is trying to bring together the arts and science in the research process. So how might we use visual and performative and literary means to both create research, but also disseminate or communicate empirical research findings to audiences who might not otherwise access typical academic resources. So if you think about clinicians or policymakers and healthcare consumers and their families, we'll say we can't access those peer-reviewed articles. They're behind firewalls. And even if we do, we don't have time to read them. We don't understand the language. So how can we share those findings in a way that is embodied, more meaningful, and really thinking about using the arts for social change? So how might we impact change at a sort of small p and big P policy level? So it's really bringing sort of transdisciplinary individuals together. So we work with artists and creatives and anthropologists and engineers and people from, environmental science. And it's really exciting because, again, I think it sort of speaks to that more holistic view. So everyone comes with their viewpoint and embraces different ways of knowing, which I think are really important.
Yeah, thank you for that, Catherine. That's a beautiful idea, the idea of how the different ways of knowing. And I think I want to come back to Eugenie actually about that, because as an artist, you that is your practice, is these different ways of knowing and helping other people to know things in a new way, in a way that is new to them. So I'd really like to hear, if it's all right, Eugenie, to hear from you a little bit about how you manage to live with chronic pain and what your arts practice, what the role of your arts practice is in that. If it has one, it might make it worse, it might make it better, might do a bit of both. And also what are the external things that you put in place to maintain your resilience, if that word is meaningful to you. Actually, I should probably check that first.
Okay, the resilience, start with that first. As an artist, resilience doesn't really mean anything, to be honest. It just means you just do what you can, what you do, what you can find, and find the resources around you, like Lynn said. Be resourceful and just use whatever you can. But as an artist, and also as a person living with pain, and also as an advocate for speaking up for people who live with invisible disability like chronic pain, it means so much to me, and that feeds back into my art practice. So what I do in my artwork is that I draw on my own lived experience, but not only that, because I acknowledge that all pain is subjective and it's different for each individual. So I interview a whole lot about other pain patients as well. And then I also work with pain researchers and pain scientists and neuroscientists who specialize in persistent pain, and draw the latest language and latest knowledge and study for what they do, and translate that into a creative artistic language that transcends language, education, age, race, any sort of cultural barriers you can think of. Because I find art, it just creates a common language in a way that I can create holistic experience for people to understand the complexities of persistent pain. So I combine subjective and objective knowledge of persistent pain, and I share this knowledge through artwork. So I see art as a knowledge sharing platform.
Thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sure does. Thank you. That was fantastic. Top of the class. So interesting. And thank you for speaking from your own lived experience. It's not always very pleasant to be put on the spot like that. So I appreciate it. I would like to hear from all of you about the resources that you draw upon for resilience. So Lynn, I know you were speaking before about in your model that it was sort of the personal competence, but also being able to use the resources that are around you. And Eugenie was also kind of saying, well, to be an artist, you have to be resourceful. So you do what you can. So I'd really love to hear from all of you about what resources do we need to be resilient, to practice resilience.
I think I'll jump in here because I thought maybe it would be helpful just to put the model up. Just to show you where the resources are coming from. But I think probably Eugenie and I are talking about very different resources here. When we talk about resilience, according to just the research on resilience, we're actually talking about the social resources. Some people talk about it in terms of internal resources. I, in the model, would refer to the resources where you are in context. So let me just quickly show you my screen. So here's the donut. Can you see the donut? This big circle. So the resilience donut refers to basically the person, all of us are in the middle. We have resources inside us that say, I have, we might say, I have people to help me cope, or I am a nice person, or I'm clever, I'm smart, or I can do things to change my circumstances. We also have, I haven't and I'm not and I can't, and we carry that little baggage in there, and we have a little bit of a debate going on in our head. But we get the resources I have and I am and I can from 7 different areas of our life. And each of these areas are like little systems or little contexts where we have tensions, and the tensions create levels of competence that feed into the middle. So what we talk about I mean, I won't have the time to go through each of those factors now, or those little systems now, but you can see, if you look at those, you can imagine in your own lives that there is a context or a set of friends or a set of people in the community or work factors and so on. But the good news is that you only need 3. And in our research that we have found is that you get, in terms of building your competence, it gets stronger after 3 or more. It just gradually comes up after 1 and 2, but once you hit the 3rd, it comes up quite strongly. And so we often talk about ways that you can build on each of those factors, the strong factors. Don't worry about the ones that are not so strong. So in the process of using the resilience donut model in our ordinary and everyday lives, what we tend to do is that we go back to what works. We go back to the resources, which are each of those factors on the outside. We go back to those resources to help us to cope. And there are times in our lives when those resources are knocked out. So it might be there's three set of resources that we've got going well, and something happens in our life, either chronic pain knocks out one of those factors, or we have a transition in our life, we change jobs, or we have a child, or we do something that's different, or we have COVID-19 and we can't work, then that means then some of those factors fall out and we become depleted, and we've got to try and work out how we can pull other resources back together again. And so essentially resilience is about our ability to navigate and negotiate with the resources, but that's also about the resources' ability to navigate and negotiate back with us. I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Lynn. That's fascinating. So, no, can you leave that on the screen? I want to ask some questions about it.
I was going to say, I think you can imagine that there's a lot of overlap between those factors as well.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. Right. So you can sort of see how there might be a ripple effect to the positive or negative, as you mentioned, that one stressor could impact, 4 of those factors.
Yes. And quite often we find that people who have their 3 factors and they're feeling quite strong and doing quite well, which is most of us, we have good moments of resilience, and then we have not so good moments. That time of when one is changed can actually offset the others as well. But as adults, we've mostly, for the people who are quite successfully navigated their resources, they often have other options that they can pick up another one. But it doesn't mean they don't feel good. It just, it might mean that they don't feel great for a while, and then they get themselves back on track and put another 3 into place.
Okay.
I ask, are any of the factors, do they emerge as being more important than others, or does it vary?
Depends on the culture. So we've transferred this across a number of different cultures. Certainly in China, the Chinese people that are using this have reported back that their education factor and family factor are extremely strong. The Maori groups that have been using this have said they don't really place, particularly with the children's model. The children model, instead of partner, has a parent factor. They don't draw on the parent factor as much as they draw on the family factor. They would say the family was much stronger. And certainly in the UK and in Australia, we're seeing that it changes, but work, particularly for adults, work becomes quite pivotal and work and family tend to be quite pivotal. So, and we see a difference with genders depending on how much people are working. But I think what is really, really nice about this is that it sort of explains the multidimensional part of resilience. So all of us here and the many people who are listening, none of us will have the same set of 3 donut factors that will be keeping us buoyant. We'd have different sorts of things going on in each of our factors. And it may mean that what's important for me is not important for you, and that's okay. That's why using the model in an intervention sense is really quite individualistic.
Fascinating. Thank you, Lynn. I want to ask you, Eugenie, if when you look at the donut, what you feel as an artist are the most important dimensions for you?
At the moment,
At the moment.
the skill factor and also family, because I hang out with my family all the time. But then again, that hasn't changed because I've been very isolated because of my illness anyway. So I feel more like normal and just like everybody else now, and I feel more like part of the community because that's what everyone's facing, and the entire global attitude of we're in this together and we're supporting each other, and people go out of their way to support others and small businesses and so that just really warms my heart. And I just really wish this attitude would continue on even well after things ease down a little bit.
It's so interesting that the family and the skill factor, but maybe at the moment the community factor is because people are a bit more open to someone like yourself who is often isolated from community by your condition. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I actually feel less isolated now than before.
Yeah. Which is kind of good, but is a bit of a message to everybody else in the world that I kind of know what you mean, that we're all in this together thing. I mean, I don't have lived experience of pain like you, so I don't know what you mean in that context, but just more generally in terms of kind of existential loneliness and existential angst, and that way that people at the moment are kind of all feeling it. Is not great, but also kind of nice.
Yeah, I mean, people living with persistent pain, particularly, I think they go through existential crisis on a daily basis. So I highly respect people who are resilient, and especially my artwork is really all about showcasing the resilience of people who live with pain. And I'm just putting other people who don't live with that kind of condition, to have a different sort of understanding to what they have thought before. And I tend to use technology and participatory, very hands-on experience for participants. And now the COVID has come in and I can no longer share that resilience with people. So I kind of find it rather ironic.
Yeah, that is ironic.
Yeah.
Although I imagine as because your way of sharing knowledge and experience is kind of intrinsic to your being, that there's probably other ways that you're doing it without even really noticing. Just because you're not putting someone in a belt doesn't mean that you're not doing what you do every day and in every sort of situation that you have contact with people. And this is, this seminar right now is a small example of that. You've definitely schooled me already in a good way, all three of you. So I'm also keen to know, Lynn, a bit about the personal competence part of the donut. Is that the I have, I am, I can?
Yeah. So really, with the personal competence, when we look at our internal strengths that we draw on, it's usually around experiences that we've done well in the past, or how we would sort of establish who we are, like our sense of self, and also about who matters, who we're doing things for. So this is why the I have, I am, and I can is essentially summarizes that personal competence. But when I've done research, what I've done is actually looked at personal competence, social competence, the ability to get organized, the ability to be flexible, and to have, maybe social skills that are in new, not just your own normal social network, but social skills for other areas. And what we have found is that the stronger the three, only three, but the stronger three factors that you have, the more of those social competence or personal competencies that you have. And when we're working with young children, we don't go and teach them how to be resilient, because it just doesn't work. Because really we learn that concept of resilience in relationship with other people, doing the things that we're learning on the way. And so that's why it's a doing word. It's why it's a verb. So what we tend to do when we're working with children and adults is to actually get them to have what we call donut moments. And they establish their donut moments. They find out what their top 3 are, and then they do something that blends them all together. So, you know,
donut moment.
So Eugenie at the moment, I can just see she's feeling good at the moment because she's having a donut moment. Like, this is where her work and her skill and her community is sort of all coming together. And probably a family are in the background cheering her on as well. And so that's that sense of donut moment where they're all like, she's standing nice and firm on 3 legs on a stool going, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. I have people to help me cope, and I am okay, and I'm good at my job, and I can do this. I can get through it. And that process builds so much in ourselves that then it flows on to the areas that aren't so good, without us really realizing it, without us working on it.
Thanks, Lynn. Catherine.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this, looking at the donut and thinking exactly that, Lynn, that I'm thinking about our Arts on Prescription program and how drawing on the arts, definitely the skill factor in terms of competencies and people engaging in the arts in that way, definitely community factor. People feel a sense of community coming together to discuss an artwork. The work factor, education factor, learning about, artists, Australian and otherwise. So it's quite exciting to see how a particular, whether it's an intervention, a resource, an activity, and I guess I'm thinking of the arts generally, how they can contribute. And just even thinking about something like a global pandemic, when we've seen, sort of this, again, talk about resilience, kind of this pivoting to engaging in different ways online. Suddenly you have online virtual museums and virtual, galleries, and people are engaging in creative activities. And I mean, I know at that sort of the height of the pandemic, I mean, you couldn't order paints or puzzles or wool, or so people were turning to the arts in a significant way. And I think this is very useful to conceptualize that a lot of the work that we're doing on so many dimensions.
Yeah, thanks. That was actually my question for you, Catherine, was coming up next, really about that program. Can you tell us, I think we've got a question in the chat.
Would you like me to turn the
tell us a little bit
screen
more
off?
About, all right.
It's just leave it on. I can leave it on.
So there's a question about the art on prescription model. Yeah. And
yes.
Just let me remind all the attendees that you're very welcome to pop questions in the chat for the panelists. Don't let me hog them. Okay.
So yeah, there's just a question about the Arts on Prescription program, which again really goes back to Lynn's definition of resilience in terms of thinking about addressing social determinants of health and well-being. So social prescribing, not the greatest term in the universe, because again, I think the whole notion of prescribing kind of plunks itself into kind of the medical model that it's trying to move somewhat outside of, but given that it is the commonly used term. So within social prescription, it's an umbrella term for resources in the community outside of the formal medical system. So you sort of think of exercise on prescription, arts on prescription, cooking on prescription, bibliotherapy, so reading on prescription, gardening on prescription, and the list goes on. So within the Black Dog Institute, we're trying to embrace a more holistic model. So we have an exercise physiology clinic, so looking at the importance of physical health. And we trialed late last year an Arts on Prescription program. So it was in partnership with the Art Gallery of New South Wales. Had an amazing curated artworks by Daniela Govada at the gallery. And we actually had a small pilot trial of adults impacted by depression, and we randomized them to the intervention. So that was 8 sessions at the art gallery. And there was a wait list. And in my entire research career, we have never had our entire sample sign up within 24 hours, which I think speaks to the interest in the arts as in the research process. And so we found that the group that received the arts engagement program demonstrated post 8 sessions significantly greater mental health and well-being, significantly greater feelings of social inclusion and connectedness. And in fact, I think about half of the group continued to meet at the gallery after the research study had been completed. In February, we had the waitlist control group receive the intervention, and halfway through, the art gallery closed because of COVID, and the group were really intent on continuing. So again, we pivoted to an online arts on prescription program, and the group continued that way. So when I talked to our CEO about the arts on prescription program, she said, well, can't we offer it to the general public in these times of COVID? And so we modified that, and it became Culture Dose, which is a fortnightly arts engagement program that's open to the public. And Danielle from the gallery and I facilitate this, and we view 3 artworks every fortnight. And we use the chat function, engage in a discussion about the artworks. And it's been wonderful. We've been, of course, evaluating that and looking at some of the responses by such a wide variety of people who tune in virtually to engage in these artworks. And they talk about the difference it makes in their lives, how it's sort of a time out from themselves. It's a very meditative kind of session where we sort of always bring people back to how they're feeling, to their bodies, to be really conscious of their bodies. And we're just looking to continue that on beyond the 10 sessions that we have. And we've got people who are tuning in internationally. So it's really nice to see. And I would encourage any of our attendees to just Google Culture Dose and tune in, if you can, to these very carefully curated artworks. Really, I think offering an opportunity for people to just really sort of take a break from the everyday stresses of life and sort of immerse themselves in these artworks. And every session has a theme. So it might be finding joy in everyday life, immersing oneself in nature, talking about engaging with others, etc.
Oh, thanks, Catherine. Doesn't that sound good?
Can I make a comment? Catherine, I think what's happening there, it's not just about the arts. It's actually what you're doing is that you're using the arts as a medium to bring the 3 strengths in their donuts together. Because you most often will see people with they might have a friend that they've connected with. They might then connect onto a community. They're bringing in their skill of, arts appreciation or discussion and so on. And so, or you've got education going on, just like you said before. So in a sense, for everybody who would be on there, they would probably have 3 strengths that are being linked just on that process. It's brilliant. And I think one of the dangers that we've got in using a medium that we think, oh, that's it, it's all about the arts. As soon as they're in arts, that's going to be it. But what the model in resilience is saying is it's more than just that. It's how it connects with their strengths, how it brings other strengths in as well. We had the danger with young people when we were working on doing community resilience and trying to build the resilience of young people. And they thought skate parks is going to be it. Everyone's skate park. They're going to have a skate park and it's all about skating. Well, that was just one of the aspects. It was the fact that they brought their friends together and there was a community going on around that. And that became the 3 strengths in that. So I would, I'm just having a happy dance here because of what you're doing. I just think it's brilliant and getting excited about the collection of strengths that you're bringing together in that process.
Lynn, that's you're having a donut moment.
I'm having a donut moment.
But that's so great what you're saying, because that is what the arts do. you know, like listening to you. But that is when we do a lot of work in evaluation, and we're always evaluating these different dimensions of an experience and talking about why arts experiences are so effective. And it is, you know, this is a great way of talking about it, this framework. It is because it brings all these things together. It's always to do with the bonding aspect and bringing people together in a shared atmosphere. And even online, you can still achieve that if there's enough kind of community interaction happening, or that sort of thing. I'm curious as to where sort of like people's connection to mystery or spirituality or whatever you want to call it, where that fits in.
There's been a lot of work done on that one. And in the community factor, one of the things that came through with just the research that I've drawn on in the community factors is people who are connected in a faith. They tend to have a very strong community factor, but there was debate at the time when we were setting up the model of whether we put faith as being a separate factor. But then when we looked at the research, particularly Maureen Miner's work in Australia, she'd actually picked up that faith affects all aspects of the donut. So there was there's no one segment. So in a sense, faith comes into all aspects, and we'll change that. But particularly community is much stronger for people who have faith from all faiths, all of the major faiths.
I guess the reason I bring it up is not so much about faith or religion as about transcendence and kind of connection to mystery and spirituality, because those are dimensions of arts experiences, or at least not all, but definitely like the research into arts experiences has shown, for want of a better word really, that it's transcendence is essentially something that people get from an arts experience, transcendence or captivation or whatever you want to call it. And I'm just wondering, where you talk about that that is one of the big things that arts can do, really.
Yeah,
is like
that would
wrap
be
all of this
great.
up in a transcendent experience.
Transformational even. Yeah, dare I say, yeah.
Whatever it is, I don't know what the right word is for it. I've spent a long time trying to figure it out and I haven't got there. Eugenie, have you got any insights on that piece?
No, all I can tell is art can be exceptionally powerful. And also when Catherine initially mentioned that, you know, people don't have time or education to read difficult articles, you know, like for instance, some of the artworks that I'm presenting, it has a really complex neuroscience knowledge embedded in it, but people can actually understand. And they take it personally because I engage their body parts and their emotions, and they're completely engaged. And once they're engaged to an artwork that they feel really personal about, then I find that it is exceptionally easy to feed all sorts of knowledge into them, and they're ready to absorb almost like a sponge, and they're interested and they're ready to talk about it and start creating networking effect by talking to other people about it with so much passion. And I just find art, it's just exceptionally powerful that we can spread knowledge through art.
Yeah, thanks.
And we could also change a culture that way.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. There is this, I guess that's sort of what I was trying to get at, but I didn't know the right words for it, is that transformative effect that can come from an arts experience, even if it's just a short arts experience. You know, it can be really, I mean, ideally, you know, you have engagement over a period of time, but just even going to see a show can deeply move you and open you up to change. Doesn't necessarily change you on the spot, but it opens you up to change. So yeah, I'm just curious to know where that fits in the donut.
It's interesting because I as a psychologist, I tend to think through people's moral development. Sorry, turn your phone off when you do a webinar. The moral development, and the moral development is about, you know, seeing things from another's perspective or seeing things outside of yourself. So it's the opposite to narcissism. And so in a sense, when you are engaged in that transcendent or transformative process personally, it is that sense of moving outside of yourself and seeing things from different perspectives. And that's what the arts experience does, I believe, personally. But I agree that there's another dimension that we just can't put our finger on. But I think also when you're in an experience where you feel totally comfortable, and you're in a context where you feel like oh, this is beautiful, or you just you drop your shoulders and you feel like this is nice, you let yourself become vulnerable. And when you let yourself become vulnerable, then you then are much more open to letting other people touch your soul. So that level of vulnerability comes in context. So people who are not comfortable with others and they don't have the skills are often because they don't have the resources around where they can feel vulnerable. And so they become prickly and they close up. And then, you know, you run the risk of not having that ability to transform and change as you go through adversity, which is really essentially what resilience is about, that transformative process through adversity, where you change who you are, you change who you see, that ability to see things from another's perspective, where you have compassion, deep compassion, and you can understand. And I think this is where Eugenie's work is just beautiful, that deep compassion that you can then have in another person who's in pain, because you then experience it and then have a little bit of a glimpse of what it's like in their world. And so that appreciation then enables you to become more vulnerable in your compassionate response.
I guess also the thing about your work, Eugenie, is the thing about pain is that you can't avoid it if you're in pain in a way. So it forces you to be vulnerable in a way. So I like what you're saying, Lynn, in terms of, you know, an arts experience can kind of relax people into a position of vulnerability, but sometimes arts experiences don't do that. They're uncomfortable, but they still crack people open in the way that I imagine Eugenie's work made, because she probably, I don't know Eugenie, but I feel like maybe your work forces people to be vulnerable, and like, that's fine, that's good. Sometimes we need a push, right? But that still cracks you open, you know, for that transformation.
The artworks are done through booking systems, so people have to actually make a booking to come and experience my work. And time again, I am so surprised how many people are willing to come and experience pain-like experience, because it requires certain generosity and curiosity. They need to be able to give themselves to experience something that is not pretty. But there are so many people out there, and I am just so appreciative, and it just marvels me how many vulnerable souls are out there who are willing to put themselves into certain situations that may not be pleasant.
Yeah, and you just described the art going public, so it's totally true. But yeah, that is a beautiful takeaway, really, that people have that generosity. They bring that with them to the experience. We're running out of time. Okay, so there's a question in the Q&A about maybe artists can measure their impact on well-being using the donut. Yeah, Judith, I was thinking the same thing. It's from Judith Botel, or she's popped it in there anyway, because I come from I do social impact evaluation. Yeah, I think that'd be a fantastic tool for looking at impact on well-being, but also maybe working with Lynn possibly on, you know, adding that other dimension that we're talking about, that transformational, dimensional, whatever it is, the soul dimension, the openness dimension. I don't know what it is.
We certainly found that with
to
the
sort of capture.
with the Big Anxiety Festival, because we evaluated it, and this is sort of thinking about 70 different artworks and installations and immersive activities, of which Eugenie's was one of them, and with I don't know, almost 400 respondents, and exactly what you're describing, Lynn, is that feeling that it's a safe place and space to engage in these different artworks and immerse themselves in, some very, heavy material. But I think reflecting on the other end about the impact it had on creating feelings of empathy or sparked conversations that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So creating a space to engage in conversations that are often difficult. And I think particularly in the qualitative aspects. So this was sort of a long survey that was based on a logic model. But what we found was the most relevant information were the text that people wrote about these experiences and trying to describe them. So again, it kind of speaks to this more ephemeral kind of feelings and emotions that aren't really captured quantitatively. And I can sort of see in this conversation, we're trying to grasp at that. What is that that's somehow transformational and changes the way people think or their viewpoints or what the way they view the world in essence. And whether or not these how long they last, sort of post-immersing in this experience. But even if I draw on sort of my own experiences many years ago of one particular art installation, in a gallery where you probably know they're often much more interactive now. And it was a pile of beautifully positioned suitcases. On every suitcase was a tag. And the instructions to the viewer was, if you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you be and with whom? And so you start reading what people have written on all the tags. And it was exquisite. I was standing there crying, reading these tags, and you had a tag that you could add so you could contribute to that. And it was just to me an example of the power of just engaging with the invisible others who had written these beautiful, beautiful pieces about where they wanted to be or where they would like to be and with whom. And it was just so amazing that I remember this. It's impacted me years later. So I do feel like it can be quite, when you talk about power and how powerful a moment can be, I do think that it can be powerful and can last over time.
That's lovely. I'm just thinking about who I want to be with right now.
I think we're almost out of time, but if you have any, that was a beautiful thing to share, Catherine, and just put Eugenie and Lynn slightly on the spot. But if as Catherine was talking, you were thinking of an arts experience that did that for you as well, that you might want to share, you're very welcome to. For me, that's Yayoi Kusama. I remember, the Japanese artist who, she has a particular
dots.
The dots, yeah, and the infinity rooms. You step into a room and it's little silver balls mirrored, so it just goes on and on and on and on and on, and you feel like you're standing in eternity. It's just amazing. And she lives in a small cabin on the grounds of a psychiatric hospital in Japan, so that she has the care and support that she needs, but she creates them, and and then she can create this incredible art, which I just, ever since then, I've wanted my own infinity room, infinity cupboard, infinity helmet. I'll take what I can get. Something where you put it on and you just in that infinite space that she creates. Judith popped in Rothko's chapel, that's hers, at the National Gallery in Washington, DC. Yeah, everyone's popping there. They're different. Yeah, we've all got one, and that's why we're all here, right? So yeah. We can...
I would like to say the first one, when Catherine talked about safe space and the artwork, I will have to say Tammy Brennan's opera Daughter. I don't know if anybody actually watched this performance, but
I'll look it up.
touched so deeply in me that I have to say I couldn't stay the full performance to watch because it was just too powerful. And I just broke down in tears, and I actually literally had to go and find a counselor, but in a good way. But it was so, so powerful, and it really opened me up in a most wonderful and traumatic and most vulnerable way, everything combined. And I don't think I have ever experienced anything that powerful in my life.
Whoa, that's an amazing recommendation. Must try and see that. Lynn?
For me, Belvoir Street put on a performance of Every Brilliant Thing. I don't know if anyone
I've
saw
read
that. It was just a one artist on the stage. It was incredible, and used all the participation of everybody. So for me, it was like a massive amount of people having their donut moments all at the one time, talking about the things that they could touch and feel in terms of that soul, that soul stuff you're talking about, Jackie. So Every Brilliant Thing for me.
Oh, feeling I'm having a donut moment. I'm all filled
Same.
up. Thank you, everybody. I think we better wrap it up there, but that was just a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So Catherine, Lynn and Eugenie, on behalf of everybody, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it was lovely to be here.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.